Fun Ideas Productions presents the Fun Ideas Podcast.
We see the syphilitic shrinking obelisk, the white man's wilting dick. We see through dangling jowls of seedy game show trolls the smiling lie of the televised hive. The witches are watching with their thousand eyes. Witches are watching with their thousand eyes. We smell rotten teeth that speak beyond belief. A stick inside their
Hi, this is Mark Arnold, and welcome to Fun Ideas Podcast number 53. This episode is sponsored by the fine folks at Lee's Comics. Headquartered, the book on the monkey's solo career should be out in February or March of 2020. If luck has it, I will be making a personal appearance at the end of March at the Beetle Fest in New Jersey. I'm still waiting for the Warren Kremer book as well. I'm also still working on my own Light Up Your Life travel agency, the TTV scrapbook, and the Mad book. And I'm also working on an article about Harvey mystery comics of the 1970s, and plan to work on some new Harvey comic stories with Eric Schenauer. Our guest today was a writer for both Mad and Cracked magazines, and also wrote many scripts for Marvel Comics. He also has written many books, including The Shy Guy's Guide to Dating. Here he is, Barry Dutter. Okay, and on the phone today I have Barry Dutter. How are you today?
Doing great. How are you, Mark?
I am fine. And so how we usually start off these podcasts is I just ask, or just say, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into comedy writing.
I am a writer who has worked for Marvel Comics, Cracked Magazine, Mad Magazine, Gag Magazine, and numerous other humor magazines. And I've always loved comedy. I've always loved writing. And even when I worked at Marvel Comics, I also worked on What The, which was their humor magazine.
Oh, yeah. And what was the first one you did? Was that Cracked, or did you work on things prior to that?
Let's see. I started at Marvel, and my first sale ever to Marvel was a humorous story for What The. It was a Captain America story where it was shortly after they did this story where fans could vote on if Robin was going to die or not in the Batman comics through a call-in vote, actually. And the fans voted. They wanted blood. They wanted dead Robin.
Right.
So I did a Captain America story where we bring back Bucky, and then Cap figures out that his sales will go up if he does a phone-in poll asking if Bucky should die or not. So that was my first sale to Marvel. It was a big thrill to finally live that lifelong dream of hearing a Marvel Comics editor say to me, "You just made a sale."
Hey. Now, were you trying for quite some time, or was it just dumb luck? You just turned in one story and that was it?
I was pretty much trying my whole life. If you look in my high school yearbook, under my photo, it says, "Future writer for Marvel Comics." It literally says that. It's the only job I ever wanted, and this is one of those cases where sometimes dreams do come true. I mean, ever since I was a little kid, I was mailing in stories to Marvel, which they were terrible, and like 10,000 words on a single piece of paper, single spaced. So the kind of thing where nobody would ever read it, and if they did, they'd be like, "What is this? Who wrote this?" And so it was my lifelong dream to get into Marvel, and I started off as a letter hack, which is one of the ways you could break into comics in those days.
Right.
So I would write letters to the editor. I would every week, but most of the comics I read, I had opinions about it. It's kind of funny because when you're young, you just have so many opinions about everything. And I find like when I get older, like I don't ever think to write a letter to the editor of any comic book or magazine or TV show or whatever. It's you just you watch something and you go, yeah, it was okay.
Yeah.
But when you're a kid, you're like, this was the worst thing ever that's ever been done in the history of things.
Well, also when we were kids, you did still have to take out the pen and paper. It wasn't like now where you just dash off some email or do a Twitter or something like that. So it's a little bit different in that regard too. But
Yeah, but I was very active. I would mail out, let's say 5 or 10 letters a week to Marvel,
Wow.
my opinions about their comics, and I got a lot of letters printed. If you go back to the early '80s or so, you'll see, if you pick up 10 Marvel comics, probably a couple of them have letters in them from me. And at a certain point, I was actually on the list of people who were getting too many letters printed.
Oh.
So then I was on the do not print his letters list
Ooh.
for that reason. But then I still got a lot printed anyway. And I sort of became famous for launching my anti-She-Hulk campaign, which was a letter writing campaign. What happened was Marvel came out with this character called the She-Hulk, and
Right.
I always like to say, when they introduced Spider-Woman, I said nothing. When they introduced Ms. Marvel, I said nothing. By the time they introduced She-Hulk, I said, okay, this is it. We can't have this. This is ridiculous. It makes us a laughingstock, us Marvel fans. Because all our lives, we always made fun of DC Comics. They have Superman, Super Baby, Super Horse, Super Dog, et cetera, et cetera. And, as a Marvel fan, that's one of the things you could make fun of about DC, because Marvel would never do that.
Right.
They had too much integrity to milk their characters like that. And then as we reached a certain point where, for copyright reasons, it became necessary for Marvel to introduce different versions of their characters just to prevent other people from doing the same thing. Apparently, DC Comics did a story once where they had a character called Spider-Girl.
Oh.
And then, in fact, there was even a TV show that aired called Web Woman.
Yes.
And she had all the powers of Spider-Man. So Marvel essentially had no choice. They had to come out with a Spider-Woman just to stop someone else from doing it.
Right.
And then Universal Studios was like, hey, we're going to launch we have the Hulk TV show. We're going to launch a She-Hulk TV show that we will own all the rights to because we are creating it. And Marvel was like, well, no, if we publish a She-Hulk comic first, then you will not own She-Hulk. So even as a little kid, I was aware of all this behind-the-scenes stuff going on. And I didn't like that. To my knowledge, She-Hulk was one of the first characters introduced simply for copyright reasons, just to protect a trademark or whatever the fuck. So I was, furious. I guess I don't know if that's the word for it, but I was apoplectic. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I just said, we can't have the She-Hulk. It's too stupid. We have to do something to shut her down. So I launched a letter writing campaign, and then I made up a fake committee, hundreds of letters, all written by me with fake names, petitions with fake signatures, and just bombarded Marvel Comics with this fake campaign to get the She-Hulk comic canceled. And the editor, or writer of, and editor, I think he was, of the She-Hulk comic, a man named David Anthony Kraft, he thought my letters were funny, and he used to print them, although apparently the editor-in-chief of Marvel Comics told him, don't print those letters, because we don't want this committee to have any power over our character. So, long story short, the She-Hulk comic was canceled a couple years later. Nothing to do with my fake committee, I'm sure. Absolutely nothing. It was, I can't take any credit for it. In fact, I've even come to accept the She-Hulk as a legit character because over the years, different people have come in and she's gone beyond her roots as a Hulk ripoff character to, sort of blossom into her own identity.
Right. So you canceled, or got canceled, you think, Savage She-Hulk, not the later incarnation of Sensational She-Hulk, which actually, I did enjoy that one, but it's probably for perverted reasons more than anything else.
Well, John Byrne was doing the art on Sensational She-Hulk, and he actually introduced a fresh angle to the character. She was kind of the original Deadpool. She was the first breaking the fourth wall character, at least in the Marvel universe that I can think of. And so that was, that was the beginning of people going, oh, wait a minute, there's different approaches to She-Hulk. She doesn't just have to be like a girl going She-Hulk smash, like a female version of the Hulk.
Yeah.
So that character went away, but I forget how we started this.
How you got into Marvel, and you said you were a letter hack at first, and then...
Yes.
Now, at that time, did you read every Marvel thing? Were you a true Marvel zombie?
I wouldn't say I read everything. I kind of... Let me tell you, my great frustration with Marvel Comics... I came aboard in the 70s, which was a great, great time for Marvel Comics. There were so many great new characters, new concepts, new formats, and new people, new artists, and new writers and artists being brought in. And then by the time we got to the 80s, it's like that all came to a dead stop.
Yep.
There were a couple of good books. You still had your Claremont Byrne X-Men for a little bit. You had your Frank Miller Daredevil, which was at one point the only thing Marvel really had going for them. Mm-hmm. And then there came a point where it seemed like new characters and new concepts stopped being introduced in the Marvel Universe. You go back to the 80s, and it's basically Transformers, Rom Space Knight, Micronauts, Shogun Warriors, G.I. Joe. Every single one of them a licensed property. Now, I know there are fans of all those books, and I'm not trying to take anything away from anybody who likes those things. You could certainly enjoy those things. But to me, as a Marvel fan, it was really frustrating to me that nothing really new came out of Marvel in the 80s in terms of a character, new characters, Marvel characters who lasted.
Right.
So that was frustrating. but then, what I did was I started getting into the fan press. I started writing for Comics Buyer's Guide, Amazing Heroes, Comic Scene, SCENE,
yes,
and random other, fan magazines. I started getting interviews with writers and artists who worked for Marvel, and I got to know people that way. And that was yet another way to break into the industry also. So, I was following sort of a standard path that had been blazed before me by many others. Start off with the letter writing, then you get into the fan press, and then if you're then I started writing for Marvel Age magazine,
right,
which was Marvel's house organ at the time, and that was a pretty big thrill too, to be getting basically one article a month in Marvel Age, which was a legit assignment from Marvel Comics. That was the beginning. That's where it really all started.
Was that before or after the What The?
That was before, actually.
Oh, okay,
but I mean, What The was my first story.
Got
first
it.
comic book
okay.
story.
Just want to make sure on the timeline here.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
But what type of stories? I know you said you did the one with 10,000 words on one page that nobody would read, but when you got a little more straightforward and got the the format down, was there any stories you sent in prior to the What The that you thought, oh, this will work, and it got rejected for whatever? What titles were those for?
I had an Incredible Hulk story that I thought was really good, and I still think the germ of the idea is good. Although, one of the curses or blessings of pitching ideas to Marvel and DC is at some point somebody else is going to have the same idea. And, I just have this list of like 100 stories that I came up with, which I've seen other people do since then. Stories that I maybe never told anybody or never shared with anybody, and just like, if you think about the Hulk, eventually this is going to come up. My Hulk story was the whole idea with the Hulk is the madder he gets, the stronger he gets.
Right.
And so I said, what if he gets so mad, we create a situation where he's angrier than he's ever been before. His rage is so great that it can't even be contained in his Hulk-sized body. So he grows into a new, even stronger form called the Behemoth. Yeah. And he would be like 20 times the size of the Hulk, almost like, Godzilla size, because he's just so angry. And it's, it'd just be a fun Hulk smashing more than usual story. And, sadly, that did not get picked up. But, over the years, there have been so many incarnations of the Hulk where he gets bigger and stronger. So it's not, in the scheme of things, doing a story where Hulk gets bigger and stronger is maybe not the most creative or innovative idea. But
right. But I suppose, because I can think back to the Hulk of the 60s and 70s, it really hadn't been done. It's like he just got to be the standard green or gray Hulk. And then kind of went back to Bruce or David Banner or whatever. Bruce Banner. It's
Bruce
David Banner on the TV show. Sorry.
Right.
David Bruce Banner. There we go.
Yes.
Anyway, but let's see. Where was I going with that?
Well, actually, if I can interrupt you real quick, I'm sorry.
Sure.
Marvel had a rule at the time, which I thought was the rule was they used to tell people, don't send in stories to us because we're not going to read them. Now, the truth is they would read them. But the catch was they would tell people not to send them in because they figured only the people who were really good or really wanted their stories to be read would submit them. So I was one of those people. I was like, tell me you're not going to read it, I'll send it in. You'll read this one.
Yeah.
And unfortunately they did. But
well, I'm sure they put that also because they didn't want to encourage it. Then they'd be inundated with, just everything. It'd be little crayon drawings of Hulk smash and everything like that. Print this, It's like, shit, too much.
And I believe we have a situation now where no one at Marvel or DC will read any unsolicited manuscript that's sent in to them.
Right.
Because you have to fill out a form. I forget what it's called, but a consent form, basically saying blah blah blah. And anyway, it's almost impossible for anybody to get in now just by mailing in a story to Marvel or DC.
Right. Well, even now, like on portfolio things for artwork, don't you have to see them at a convention now instead of at the offices? Is that correct?
I'm not sure what their current policy is. I think most Marvel and DC generally have a person in charge of submissions. I don't know if they even have that. They used to. I'm sorry. I'm a little out of date.
Well, I am too, so we'll just guess. But
I'm sure if your art is really good, you can send it in and they'll probably hire you. That's how we did it when I was on staff.
Okay, because I thought they got more strict, but they could change it at the drop of a hat. It's like, but they got so strict that they said, no, we will only see you at conventions, and namely just like San Diego or New York or something like that, the Big Apple or something, one of those bigger conventions like that, and nowhere else. So if you're stuck in like Kansas and you couldn't make it out there, you were kind of stuck and just had to go, oh well,
Well. I still can't believe that if somebody sent in some great artwork to Marvel that they wouldn't want to hire the person.
That's true too. Yeah.
Right to me, like as an editor, you get packages every day and submissions and so forth. And the other thing, I guess they're thinking, if you really want to make it an industry, you'll find a way to get to San Diego or New York. Maybe that's again part of that package of
true.
The people who really want to get in will get in.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thinking there. But I was going to mention one thing. One time I asked my editor at Marvel Age, I said, would it be possible for me to come up and visit the Marvel offices? And they said, sure, come on up, we'll give you a tour. So, of course, as a youngster, I was probably maybe 20 years, I don't remember how it was, let's say 20s, early 20s. And it was, still a huge thrill to get to go to the Marvel offices.
Right.
And then I met my editor, who was Jim Salicrup at the time. And a couple months later, my editor at Marvel Age got transferred to a different department. And Salicrup remembered meeting me, and he called me up one day and said, how would you like a job on staff as the new editor of Marvel Age magazine?
Oh, cool.
I'm sorry, assistant editor.
Okay.
Let me get that right. But, it was just so random. Like, that's kind of, yes, it's the only job I ever wanted, but I never filled out an application. That's how I like to put it.
Right. Yeah.
I went to school, studied journalism and creative writing, and, I was always studying and, working to become a better writer, but it wasn't like I went in there and met with the person who is in charge of their HR director and submitted a resume or anything like that.
Right. Well, it sounds like when you were doing it back in the 80s, is like you didn't have to do it that way. It was still a little, because every Marvel story, every interview that I've ever done or transcribed or listened to, it seems like they all have similar stories of what you're talking about. It was very casual. It wasn't this strict environment. You have to do it this way or you just won't get in, or whatever.
Yeah, Marvel has become more corporate over time as they were bought up by bigger and bigger corporations. So that's unfortunately an inevitable part, I suppose, of doing business in this time.
Yeah.
So I got in as an editor. Then an opportunity came up to become an assistant editor on a bunch of different comics. So I was working on as an assistant editor on Conan the Barbarian, Captain America, a wrestling comic book from Marvel, a bunch of others, Savage Sword of Conan. And so, it was great. Here's the greatest thing about working for Marvel is, when I was there, you could pick up the phone at any time and call up. We had like Todd McFarlane did a Conan cover for us. So since we had Todd, I said, well, why don't we call Jim Lee? So I called Jim Lee, and he did a cover for us, Conan Fighting Red Sonja. And then I would call up Art Adams, or I would go, we did a reprint of John Byrne's Captain America story, so I called up John Byrne, and he did and there's kind of a funny story with John Byrne where he did an issue of the Fantastic Four where he was, he brought in She-Hulk as a member of the FF.
Yeah.
And that was enough to get me to quit buying the Fantastic Four at that point. Because I was like, I read all of John Byrne's Fantastic Four until that point, and I said, no, we can't have this. This is trying to legitimize a character that had gone away. Remember, she was essentially absent from the Marvel Universe for a little while after her comic was canceled.
Right.
So this was the beginning of the big She-Hulk rehabilitation.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, no, this is everything I've worked for my whole life. It's all falling apart because he's bringing this character into the Fantastic Four. So, of course, I launched the committee to but to get the She-Hulk out of the Fantastic Four. Another one of my fake committees where I was the only member, of course.
Right.
and I would bombard John Byrne with letters every month. So most of them signed by me this time around. And Byrne just at a certain point, he just got sick of it. He didn't think it was funny. He wasn't appreciating my my rants about the She-Hulk. So he actually put me in a comic as a villain who tortures the She-Hulk for a whole issue and then gets his ass kicked by She-Hulk at the end.
I was going to ask you about that. So,
oh, you were? Okay.
Yeah, because I read that somewhere. I said, "Is that true?" So, but it was only in one spot I saw it. I didn't do that heavy research, but and the character was named Dutter.
Yes,
D-U-T-T-A.
I mean, it was very subtle. Very subtle. Nobody would have caught it if. And it just, I love the fact that there is a character in the Marvel Universe named after me. He only appeared once, and if I do have any regrets at all, is that while I was on staff at Marvel, I was friends with the editor of She-Hulk, and I did pitch one She-Hulk story, but I never did pitch the return of Dutter. And I'm looking back now going, how did I not pitch that? I mean,
you're anticipating my questions here. It's like, would you have, you were anticipating my questions here. This was fine. So I'm just saying. It's like, so you're looking forward to the She-Hulk Dutter marriage issue, right? Yeah, it's like the wedding issue.
Because rather than the idea of Dutter comes back and just tries to kill She-Hulk again, I was thinking, well, what if now Dutter realizes that she is a great and powerful warrior and he respects her now? What if he thinks that she would make a good mate, so he wants to marry her now? Or
right.
Funny like. So that would have been it wouldn't have been the predictable Dutter's revenge where he's like, this time I'll kill you for real, That would have been, kind of predictable and boring. But I think it would have been fun if Dutter had a change of heart and he goes from number one She-Hulk hater to the point where he loves her so much and then she really can't stand it because he's just so clingy or something. And the She-Hulk comic was funny. It was, played for laughs pretty much. In the sensational era. Mm-hmm. So it actually would have been, I think, a really cute and funny story. But I never really took it beyond the initial idea.
Yeah. Oh,
much to my regret. But I always like to say, someday Dutter will return.
Yes.
I don't know where, I don't know when, but a great character cannot stay down, and he is just too great of a character.
Well, I'm looking forward to your Slurpee cup, so hey, probably be looking a long time. Huh? Anyway, now. I have two questions, and I'm starting to ask them at the same time. Now,
okay.
Did you get over to Cracked while you were working at Marvel, or was that later, or did you continue to work at Marvel, and do you ever do anything for Marvel now? So those are both the questions, so you can answer them.
A lot of questions there.
Yeah.
Let's backtrack for a minute. So I was on staff at Marvel for a few years, but my whole dream, the whole time I was there, I used to just go around telling everybody, but what I really want to do is quit staff and go freelance, which is not the smartest thing to say to people when you're on staff. For a major, it tends to limit one's prospects for rising in the company. But it's kind of funny because I never wanted to be on staff at Marvel, but I paid a lot of attention to how people got work writing for Marvel. And at the time, the way you got writing work for Marvel was you worked on staff as an editor. That was the path that Mark Grunwald, Ralph Macchio, Joe Duffy, so many others before me followed that path. Mm-hmm. And I was like, all right, well, that seems like, it's like the last thing I ever wanted in my life was to work a 9-to-5 job. Because, like creative types, we make our own hours, work in our pajamas, work at home, that kind of thing.
Right.
But I said, all right, I will bite the bullet, I will make the sacrifice, and I will go on staff at Marvel. And then what happens is you wind up getting great benefits, health benefits, 401k, paid vacations, and you're like, I don't want. Well, wait a minute. Let's rethink this for a minute. Do I want this? But what I did do while I was on staff was I made a lot of connections. I started getting writing work while on staff until finally there came a point where I was able to leave staff, and kind of reluctantly, but. At the same point, you're like, all right, this is my real dream. You always want to, you don't just want to take the paycheck. Sometimes you want to try and stick to the dream of being a freelance writer.
Right.
So went freelance, and as soon as I went freelance, I moved down to Florida because I was tired of those, cold East Coast winters up north. Mm-hmm. I was still living in New York, New Jersey area, specifically New Jersey. But anyway, okay, at this point, I'm freelance. I'm writing Ren and Stimpy for Marvel Comics. Mm-hmm. I'm writing a couple pages every month in Beavis and Butthead. I'm writing Power Rangers. I'm writing the weekly Bullpen Bulletins page. So I'm legit, like a full-time writer, freelance writer.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll never forget one time I was at a party and I met a woman, and she said, "What do you do for a living?" And I said, "I'm a writer." And she goes, "Yeah, no, but what do you do? Like what? Yeah, because no writer in the world could possibly pay their bills or make a living." She said, "Well, what do you do?" And I said, "No, I'm a writer. That's what I do." And it never occurred to me that, oh, you mean there are writers who have to take other jobs and do other things to pay their bills? That was a little bit of a role. And it was kind of funny because at one point I was writing the monthly Ren and Stimpy, and then they decided to do a quarterly Ren and Stimpy, which would be an extra 64 pages every now and then.
Right.
And so I'll never forget this. This is back in the days when your work used to come in over the fax machine.
Mm-hmm.
Like an artist would draw a page of Ren and Stimpy, and then they would fax it over to me, and I'd have to put the words in the balloons and everything. And I just remember one day, and it was extremely busy. I had a ton of work, and I just wrapped up the monthly issue, and then they started faxing me the pages from the quarterly issue, which would be another, like, I think maybe it was 48 pages that I had to write. Mm-hmm. And I had that moment where I was like, oh man, I thought my work was done. I thought my work day was over. I don't want to be doing this. And then I paused. I hit the reset button. I said, you know what? Enjoy it now, because it's not going to last. Because I know the history of comics. It's very hard for any writer to sustain a career in comics. Most of them don't last more than 5 or 10 years, and after that, for some reason the work dries up. You just don't get any more work, and at least that's how it always was in the past.
Right.
And so I said, just try to enjoy the moment. Try to remember this moment when you had so many pages coming over the fax machine that you said, I have too much work for Marvel right now. And can't deal with all this work I'm getting in this industry that I love so much. So anyway, long story short, moved to Florida as a fully employed comic book writer. Next day, they canceled all my books. They fired all the editors who were giving me work, and I was an unemployed comic book writer.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So it was very sudden, and it was just coincidence. That's when it happened. Marvel, most people forget this. Marvel went through a bankruptcy in the mid-'90s.
Right.
They made some bad investments, and it didn't pay off for them, and they made some choices, distribution choices that hurt the company and hurt the industry, and they almost sold off all their characters.
Yeah.
And long story short, I suddenly was unemployed, and I was like, oh, wow, that was a lot quicker than I thought it was going to.
Well, you were also working for the licensed books, and Marvel did that. There was a time where they canceled all the licensed book, which is kind of ironic since you were saying earlier is Transformers and ROM and blah, blah, blah. And it's like they canceled all those Ren, Stimpy, Beavis, and Butthead. I think the very last one, until they did some Star Trek later, was a single one-shot of Mighty Heroes, and that was it. And then they said, we're only going to do in-house characters from now on. And I remembered that, and that was when I stopped buying Marvels at all, because I wasn't into all their superheroes by that point.
Interesting.
But I don't know if you remember that on that side of the coin, but I was buying all those Ren and Stimpies. I remember seeing your name on there. The artist for most of them was probably this other friend of mine named Mike Kazala. So
Mike is awesome.
Did you deal with him directly then, or just you got the faxes and stuff like that?
Just got the faxes, I never dealt with him directly then. I did hire him for work years later on my own magazine. He's one of my favorite artists, and I hope to work with him again in the future. He's just super talented. One of the things that he drew for Crack, I think it was for Crack one time. We were doing a page where it was I came up with this idea of all the Japanese animated heroes fighting all the American animated heroes.
Right.
And so we did the big twist ending was all the American superheroes come in at the end and beat the crap out of all the Japanese characters. And Mike had this panel of all the characters flying in. It was like Superman flying in, and I can't remember who else. All the flying superheroes, and he actually had Popeye in there flying, which I thought was really funny. Because first of all, it's like, who thinks to put Popeye in there? It's like, why is he flying? But okay, why not? Let's go with that. But that's just the twisted genius of Mike Kazella.
Yes. I talked to him. I've seen him recently, probably in the last few months, and he's doing well and stuff like that.
Good.
He's always looking for work too. So if you ever have an opportunity for him, he'll work for you.
Good. I definitely am going to hire him again for something in the near future.
Yeah. Okay. But back to you. So how did you get into Cracked then? I mean, that seems like a weird story too, because now you were in it before Dick Culpa, right? You were in there
Yes.
right at the tail end of the Lou Silverstone, Andy Simmons era, right? Is that correct?
Yeah. Once I was freelance for Marvel, I was, of course, free to freelance for anybody else at the same time.
Okay.
So I think that was around the time I started submitting to Cracked. And, of course, let's see how I can put this. The standard procedure at the time was submit all your best stuff to Mad, it gets rejected, submit it to Cracked. That was pretty much how me and everyone else in the industry worked at the time. Cracked was the bottom-feeding magazine that got Mad's refuse or rejects.
Right.
So, yeah, I was having the hardest time breaking into Mad. I was, like, banging my head until... And, I don't remember the chronology. I did ultimately sell 2 pieces to Mad, which was fantastic and just, like, the greatest, like, a highlight. That's, like... Yeah, unfortunately, when you get a work for Mad Magazine, that's something you wear with, like, as a badge of honor. And when you get work for Cracked, you're kind of like, it's in there. It's in print.
Yeah.
So, I was submitting to Andy Simmons. He was my contact over at Cracked. And, I started to get semi-regular work for Cracked. You'd submit them 10 ideas. And it's kind of weird when you're in that mode of submitting for those magazines, because then you just start to think everything that you see is funny an idea for Cracked. And, if you submit them 10 ideas, maybe 2 of them are good, worthy of being in the magazine, and the other 8 are just, hey, I just saw a squirrel climbing a tree. I bet that could be a funny idea for Cracked. And it's like, no, that's not. Not everything is a funny idea. So, yes, I was submitting to Cracked.
Although, anyway.
You know what? No, I never got into Cracked first. Because then when Mad finally accepted one of my pieces, they said, okay, they told me, you need to make a choice here. Or they asked me, said, are you going to continue to submit to Cracked? Because if you are, then you will have to use a pseudonym for Mad. If you're going to submit to Mad exclusively, then you can use your real name, Mad.
Ooh, I didn't know that. See, I thought you did it like Silverstone did. He did his on the sly and did a pseudonym so he wouldn't get caught. And then he was ratted out by somebody else later, and so he had to make a choice at that point. But in your case, you were told to do a pseudonym? That's interesting. I don't think you ever told me that.
I was offered a choice.
Huh.
The choice was, I guess the choice would have been use your fake name for Cracks. That's probably what I should have done at that point. But then I probably would have been busted, just like Lou was. But no, I just took them at face value. They said, do you think you're going to be submitting to Cracked again in the future? My thought was, yeah, anything that you guys reject is going to go right to Cracked, of course. So it just kind of made sense to use the pseudonym. So that's, I guess, if there's a little asterisk on my work with Mad Magazine, is the fact that I never got to use my real name in Mad. But, of course, I used the pseudonym Larry Sutter, which was so close to my real name that anybody who knew me would know it was me.
Where in the world did you come up with that? That's anyway.
I don't know. It's very creative, I guess.
Well, it's better than me, and some people side with me. I have a cover that I didn't get any credit for, but I still take credit for it. It's the Seinfeld issue where Alfred E. Newman knocks on the door and he goes, "Hello, Newman," and I submitted that thing by fax, and that's a key point because after they told me and I complained about it, I said, "Hey, you published my idea." "Oh, we get lots of ideas like this," and I was talking with their lawyers. After I complained about it, then they said, and they still do, even on the waning days of Mad here, Mad does not accept faxed submissions, and it's been in the magazine ever since. And it's like, you. Anyway, so I still take credit for the cover. I don't care what they say, I didn't get paid for it, but I will still take credit for the cover until the day I die. Anyway, so but
I guess I had a similar thing. I once submitted a piece around the time the movie Titanic came out, where Leonardo DiCaprio was kind of blowing up as the hottest thing in the business, and I submitted a bunch of gags about Leonardo, and one of the jokes was something about Leonardo decapitated, and that ended up on the cover of a Cracked magazine at some point, but I was never given credit for it, though. But I do remember the editor at the time saying, "Oh, that's really funny, I love that." Yeah,
that was on the cover of one of them. I think Ben Wong drew that one out, or painted that one, or whatever.
Again, it might be just it's sort of an obvious twist on his name. So maybe somebody else came up with the same idea.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I could even say on mine, it's just that I did submit it. That's the thing. If I hadn't submitted it and they came up with it, it's like, and the fact that they were so adamant about, we get lots of ideas. It's like, come on.
Yeah.
I didn't even care about the money. I just wanted the name credit. I just wanted because I'd submit just standard letters in Mad. Like, did you ever get a letter in Mad, or did you ever even write to Mad? It's like I just when I was younger, I wanted my name in Mad, and I didn't care, and it's like I did get my name in Crazy, so I guess that's somewhere. They did publish one of my letters, so it's like that's
all right.
So I got somewhere.
That is something, yeah.
and the funny thing was, I didn't even know that it was in there until like years later. I guess I wasn't reading the letters section all the time, and it was like a couple years later. I go, and I was looking through an older issue, and I go, "Hey, it's my letter."
Nice.
And it was just a dumb letter where I was saying, "Do you think?" How did I write it? Because it's how they responded. Do you think you'll put out crazy paperback books? And they said, well, where do you want us to put them? And it's like, that's their funny yuck response to my serious question. We will be back after this message. If you live in the Bay Area, visit Lee's Comics during the month of December 2019 and enjoy a huge ongoing sale featuring quarter books, refreshed throughout the day. All back issues and sets half price. Half-price Golden and Silver Age high-value collectors wall comics, new items daily. Marvel Pure Hero shirts starting at just $5. Spider-Man, Punisher, Captain America, and more. Graphic novel sale. Buy 2 Funko Pop and get 1 free. And much, much more. Lee's Comics Mountain View is open daily from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. and 10 till 9 on Saturday. Tell them that the Fun Ideas Podcast sent you and receive a free gift. And now, back to the Fun Ideas Podcast.
Yeah.
Anyway. Hey, I was like,
I don't think they
like 12. I don't know. Anyway, go ahead.
I don't think they ever did put out a crazy paperback book, though, did they?
Well, the closest is, although I have some news for you, the closest is the Dark Horse published the complete history of Moosekind in a single volume, which originally appeared in Crazy. So I count that. But I've heard rumblings, rumble, that Marvel, because they always want to re-secure all their copyrights, is going to put out an anthology that's coming out in January of 2020. So, but I think they're going to emphasize the articles that had their superhero characters in it, which is kind of a bummer because, just a general anthology would be preferable to me. But hey, I'm happy that they're putting out something. So we'll see in January if it comes out. But anyway.
A lot of that stuff just doesn't hold up. So maybe they figured it's safer just to stick to the superhero parodies.
Yeah.
When you do like a crazy look at hippies or whatever, somehow in 2019 it just doesn't really doesn't resonate with the
True. But I still want to see a Cast for the Dead Baby in a nice anthology version. I don't know. Anyway, but what was I going to say? There is supposed to be this very month a brand new crazy issue with Obnoxio the Clown, but it's going to be comic book size, and yes, it's going to be superhero focused. So it's probably going to be like your What the or Not Brand X or something like that. So.
Yeah, I think at this point Marvel has that thing where like once a year or so they like to come out with here's a funny look at our superheroes, but it's not.
Yeah.
It's not like the old What the or Not Brand X like we used to have where it was the regular thing.
And I'm sure you know this more than me, but it seems like all the publishers, somewhere along the line, they have to resurrect an old title they haven't used in 20 or 30 years just in case somebody else wants to call their magazine Crazy. So, Is that correct? They need to do that? Because I remember DC did that around the turn of the century, is that they put out one-shots of All-American comics and Sensation comics. They made them look like they were from the 40s, but it was new stories. And I think it was just to re-secure the copyrights for another 100 years or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, that's absolutely a thing that publishers have to do to protect their trademarks.
Right. Yeah, so I figured that's what the Crazy thing's about now, because why in the world would you bring out Crazy now, especially when Mad's kind of going under and stuff like that? So, Do you have any thoughts or knowledge about that? Beyond, I talked to Kit Lively about it recently, but he's still on staff, or not on staff, but is still freelancing near the end here. So, do you have any inner knowledge about the Mad that you may know, or are you just out of the loop on all that stuff by now?
I'm out of the loop. I was really surprised when they announced the end of new material in Mad. That was kind of a shocker to me. I didn't, especially because they had just hired Bill Morrison to be the editor. So
right.
It like, Mad's moving out to Burbank or whatever. That's a new beginning. It seemed like, and that unfortunately didn't last too long.
Right.
So I wish I had some insight. I'm out of the loop on that one.
Okay.
Mad magazine did not have much use for me after my time at Cracked, so my contact with Mad is rather limited.
So you did never try to go back to Mad afterwards after doing...
I'm sure there were some submissions. I'm sure there were. But I wasn't selling them anything, so at a certain point, I just stopped sending them stuff a long time ago.
Okay.
When I was on staff at Cracked, when I was eventually became editor at Cracked, I sort of had this idea of let's make fun of Mad in every issue. Let's poke fun of Mad. Let's say we're better than Mad. Let's say Mad's, no, we never said Mad sucks. We just, let's have a continue that playful war with Mad that they've ignored for the last 60 years or however long it's been.
Right.
And, I don't think they like that. The people at Mad certainly don't appreciate being poked.
Yes. Which is ironic.
So, I'm sorry?
Which is ironic, since they poke fun at everything else.
Yeah, that's true. But, they've always had the idea that they're the only humor mag in the world. And they were the longest lasting. They did have the longest run.
Right.
And, I guess it's technically not ending, right? They're switching to all reprint.
Right. I mean, yeah. So, but even that now, it's kind of funny. It's like, and even talking to Kit about this and other people, it's like, this got them the most publicity that they've had in like 30 years that they're canceling the magazine. So I'm sure the powers that be go, let's rethink this.
I can see a once-a-year thing.
Yeah, so they may not go all reprint. I mean, they might have most issues reprint, but I bet, something significant is worthy of parodying. Like, I don't know if you ever follow it, even just seeing it on the newsstands occasionally. One issue a year is always the 20 worst things about 2019 will be coming up, typically. Yes. Yeah, so... I can see them keeping that one going because it's an easy one-page quick joke, thing that they do for 20 pages and, not do it again for the following year and have all reprints during the year. Yeah, I could see that being an annual thing still, but...
Absolutely.
Who knows, The weird thing about Mad to me, though, is that, like when we were kids and even into adulthood, they had like the little pocket-sized paperbacks and everything everywhere. And then they just kind of went away and, then they got these overpriced hardback things and stuff like that. And I never understood why they didn't continue on with some sort of paperback line or anything like that. But,
the consensus seems to be that if people want humor now, they go on the internet for humor.
True.
Heard that. In the early 2000s, I was trying to sell a pop culture trivia book, and I was told that if people want trivia these days, they go online for that. So
wow.
There seems to be this trend of people going online for things they want instead of paying, going somewhere for it.
Okay, we'll probably go back to Crack, but I want to ask you about the Gag magazine, because didn't you did 2 issues, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Both numbered 1.
Right, that's why I had to ask that. You might have done 12 number 1s, I don't know, so that's why I had to double check. I have both of them. Yay. Complete set.
Awesome.
Wasn't this true? We've talked about a lot of these things before, but never on like a formal podcast interview. You were on a game show or something, and with your winnings, you used that to fuel doing the Gag magazine? Is that what happened? Okay.
Absolutely true.
So tell that story.
I lost so much money publishing Gag 1 that the only way I could win Gag 2 would be if I went on a game show and won enough money to do it. And so I went on the Howard Stern show at an 80s music trivia game called Stump the Buoy. And I went on and I won. I won the $5,000. And I knew I could do it because I'm a longtime fan of the Stern show. I'm a huge fan of 80s music, and I always pay attention to who sings the songs. This is something I've always done.
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed that the guy who I was playing against, Baba Booey, he had a couple of weaknesses, and his big weakness was that he didn't know 80s hair bands. He thought they all sounded the same. So right there, you had an easy in to how to beat this guy.
Mm-hmm.
And thanks to the good graces of Mr. Sammy Hagar's I Can't Drive 55, I emerged victorious.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was a lot of fun. I mean, I had to bring a girl with me who may or may not have been a stripper, and the gimmick was that she had to get naked if I lost, but even though I won, they offered her more money, so she got naked. And I did have to give $1,000 to her. That was our deal that we had ahead of time. She was like, "All right, I'll come with you. You gotta pay me." Because we flew to New York. It was a whole thing. Like, if I had lost, I'm out 2 plane tickets to New York and a night in a hotel. So yeah, I definitely needed to win. Losing was not an option.
Right.
I like that. I was able to parlay that into the next issue of Gag, and then that turned out to be the final one, and that was fine. I had a lot of fun putting Gag out. It just wasn't, I always like to say, if I had published Gag in the 90s when there was the comic book boom and everything was selling millions of copies, I probably could have, well, maybe certainly not sold millions, but I certainly could have sold a lot more than I ended up selling.
Right.
And maybe made a few bucks at it, enough to continue.
Mm-hmm.
But by the year, I think it was like 2004, I did the first one. 2007, I did the second one.
Yeah.
It was really hard to launch a new humor magazine at a time when Cracked and Mad were, struggling, and people weren't looking for humor magazines at their comic shop. Because, I wasn't on newsstands. I just said, let's just go to comic shops. And then it was a real eye-opener for me when I went to a Comic-Con in 2004, to debut my first issue of Gag. And I looked around and I realized, Mad doesn't have a booth at Comic-Con, and Cracked doesn't have a booth at Comic-Con, and there's a reason for that. Because most comic book fans aren't looking for humor magazines.
Right.
So, yeah, it was definitely... in retrospect, it was kind of obvious, probably to most people on the outside, but to me on the inside, I was like, "Oh, come on, it's fun. It's fun stories and art." And I made sure to put superheroes on the cover. You have to do what you can to attract the comic book fans.
Right.
If you're only being sold in comic book shops, and I gave it a good shot. Gave it the old college try.
So, if you got a big influx of money, you wouldn't do a third one or something like that.
I don't think so. I think these days I enjoy making funny videos on YouTube, and I'd rather just put the money into funny YouTube videos. Just at this point, that's kind of more fun for me. The idea of publishing something, there's so many costs involved.
Right. In
printing. It was an education, but it was a very expensive lesson, as they say. It's like, I always like to say in life, I don't mind learning lessons. I just wish they didn't all have to be expensive lessons.
So that issue Gag deplete your money and then some, or was it just a break even, or did you still make a profit?
No, there was no profit. It was pretty devastating. It was just, I always, when you go into launching your own business, you always figure, okay, we're going to make a ton of money, or at the very least break even. You certainly don't go. No one goes into business thinking, hey, we're going to lose so much money on this thing. I went into it thinking, all right, well, let's make some money. And then it turned out to not only not make any money, but actually cost me a lot of money. So I probably overpaid on some things, overspent in some areas. Even things like promotion, things like that, I probably didn't need to fly 3 people with me out to Comic-Con and the booth and the hotel. And, that stuff, when you're doing a little small operation, it adds up.
Right.
So, it was completely as unprofitable as could be. The second one, because I didn't technically put any of my own money into it, the second one also didn't make any money, but didn't lose nearly as much money as the first one.
Yeah, that's the one I was really referring to, the one that you won with the game show, with the game show winnings. Yeah.
Yeah, the game show one, I probably, it didn't make any money, but then it was, if you want to say it technically wasn't my own money that I lost, I was betting with the house's money, so to speak. I mean, technically it was my money because I won it on a game show, but,
Right.
Literally the only reason I went on the show was to win the money to publish my magazine. I probably would not have tried to, because, again, when I go for something, I go 110%. I was bombarding the Howard Stern staff with letters and emails and cartoons and messages. Just, you've got to put me on the show. I can beat this guy. I hired a caricaturist to do vicious caricatures of Baba Booey and drawings of me beating him and posters.
Wow.
I went all in. And they just couldn't ignore me anymore. They were just like, we have to put this guy on the show. He's so confident. He seems to think he can win.
And you hate She-Hulk just for good measure, too.
Yeah. Those are the types of things that, I tend to not get as fired up about stuff as you get older. You tend to not have that kind of energy anymore.
I know. It's kind of, I mean, you said that much earlier, but, I totally agree with you. Why is it like this? Why is it like this? And it's like, and I notice that now on Facebook now. It's like, there'll be people that are 20, 30 years younger, and they'll, in fact, this just happened the other day. I'm a big Harvey Comics fan. And I did Harvey Comics Companion. And I won't name any names, but there's a new cartoon show on Netflix called Harvey Girls, and it has modified versions of Little Dot, Little Audrey, and Little Lotta, but they're not true to the comic books. Like Little Dot is now black, and different things like that, and their personalities have changed, and so it's vaguely reminiscent of the original characters if you enjoyed them in the comic books. So I got inundated by this one guy the other day, and it's happened so many times over the last 20 years, and it's like, we got to get DreamWorks to sell those characters and get them to somebody who's responsible and could make them true to the original thing. And it's like, when I was younger, I would be kind of like, yeah, you're right, we should, And now I'm like, ain't going to happen. They're making money off this thing the way they're doing it. And they're certainly not just going to give it up because some young guy just tells you so. It's like, unless it's a lawsuit situation or a bankruptcy or something, they're not going to sell the characters for anybody. So anyway, the guy got all pissy with me, but, that was the end of the story. But, it's like, that's the difference between, being younger and older, I think. You just kind of go, I know how this is going to come out.
Yeah. Like, in the back of my mind, I'm like, well, what if I started writing letters to Marvel again? Maybe that would lead to me getting back into the company again. I'm like, that would never, ever happen in 2019. So, save your stamps, boy.
There just comes a time. It's the been there, done that. Hey, it had its day, and blah blah. And I think that about Marvel and anybody else, any of the other companies. It's like, it's sad to see Mad go, it's sad to see Crack go, it's sad to see Marvel Comics change, it's sad to see everything else go, and it's like, but it had its day, and, if you want the old stuff, go buy it on eBay. It's still there, Yeah,
and the one thing you have to keep in mind is that every new generation thinks that the stuff they're seeing is the best possible version of the thing that they're seeing.
Right.
So for every, me coming up in the 70s, of course, I think that was the greatest, and people come up in the 80s go, no, it was the Transformers era at Marvel. That was the greatest.
Yeah.
And I totally get that. That's a totally valid, as a wise man once said, the golden age of comics is whenever you first started reading them.
Right.
And it's 100% true, and, that's just something you have to take into account. I'm sure there are people right now, today, in this day and age, saying this is the best era of comics, cartoons, whatever. This is the best time to be a fan of these things. And guys like you and I go, you don't know. You just don't know what you're missing.
Right. Well, so I know you buy collections because you're always posting about some great deal you made, but do you still collect yourself?
No, I do not.
Okay.
I like to tell people I do not own a single comic book. I have, boxes and boxes of merchandise from my store, but none of those are mine. That's for the store. Mm-hmm. I collected comics for over 30 years. It started at the age of 9, and then finally, by the time I reached the age of 40 or so, and I always said I will never sell one of my comics. Never. It will never, ever happen. Not an option. And even when, you go through times when maybe you need a few extra bucks, and some of them, one of your friends might say to you, why don't you just sell some of those? You've got 50 long boxes of comics collecting dust in a garage somewhere. Have you ever thought about selling some? And I would always say, don't even suggest that. That will never happen. Well, there finally came a day when you sort of think to yourself, well, I've got a bunch of boxes of comics that I no longer look at. They've been collecting dust for years, and I could trade those items in those boxes for cash, which I could use.
Yes.
And so at a certain point, the need for cash, unfortunately, outweighed the need to have a comic book collection that I no longer looked at.
Right.
And
And
it's unfortunate, but unfortunately, at a certain point, if you collect anything, there may come a day when you stop looking at the collection, where you don't acknowledge it anymore. You don't really pay attention to it.
Yeah.
And then you say, well, why do I have this thing taking up so much space in
Right.
my garage, my house?
Yeah, and I have done that. I haven't done it on everything. The only thing I've done is, partially because a lot of things aren't published anymore, is I don't acquire more. I just have what I have. You know, that's kind of where I'm at now. I still buy things, but it's certainly not in the way I used to, where I'd get like 30 comics a month or something like that. It's like, I can safely say there's not one comic book published right now that I need to go out to a comic store and buy. You know, it's just because it doesn't mean I can't buy something. It just means I don't need to buy it, or I don't care. You know, it's like
Well, the other part of that is comics have gotten so expensive these days.
Yeah.
Where it's basically $4 is about the average price for a comic book. And I don't feel like I've ever gotten $4 worth of entertainment value out of any comic book. Maybe that's just, your own mileage may vary. But, when I started, they were a quarter. And I was there the whole time when they made that jump to 30 cents and 35 and 40. And then they started jumping 10 cents at a time. Then they started jumping 25 cents at a time. Then they started jumping $1 at a time. And you're like, what?
Yeah.
And I was there, for me, pretty much 4 o'clock was the breaking, 4 o'clock, I'm sorry, $4 was the breaking point. That was to me, what I said.
It was 4 o'clock today. Yes, I get it.
Yes. But I said, we've gone too far. I can't justify this anymore. So I stopped buying once they hit $4.
Yeah. Well, I was still buying them till last year, but then things changed. This is mainly, like I said, it's like the only thing I was buying now is Mad, and I do subscribe to it, but subscribing to it gets a little cheaper. So, but but I don't say it's really a comic book that I'm actively seeking out. In comparison to everything else, but.
Sure. And then once I started flipping collections, now I can go out and buy someone's whole collection for 50 cents a book or less, and I get all the new issues from the last 5 years when someone jumps their collection off. So I'm not saying I read all of them, but it is kind of fun sometimes. I try to pick out a few that I want to read and read them for 50 cents a book instead of $4 or $5 a book. It's far more entertaining.
Now, when you say you have a shop, it's an online shop, right? You don't have a physical building. Yeah, that's what I thought, because I was like, I'd never heard of Barry's Comics, but you never know.
No. If I ever did open a store, I would want to call it Barry Comics, with no S, because I always figure these days, if I meet somebody, let's say you meet Sally, who sells seashells by the seashore, you would write in your phone, you would put Sally Seashells. So I figure if people meet me, they write Barry Comics. If they meet me for the first time and put me in their phone. So I was like, okay, that will be my store, Barry Comics. And see how many people get the name wrong.
Right.
But no, I don't see any reason to have a physical store these days. That's the greatest thing about the times that we live in. And I like to think, I'm not the most tech-savvy guy, but I'm tech-savvy enough to figure out how eBay works and how, Facebook Marketplace works and so on and so forth. You don't have to be a genius to figure those things out. But yeah, you can buy and sell things online, and you don't need a store anymore. And that's, I know a guy who opened up a comic shop a couple years ago in Pasadena, and his monthly lease was $3,000 a month, and he was out of business in about a year. It's just hard to sell. You got to sell $3,000 a month worth of product just to pay your lease. That's before buying the product for your store and paying your staff. Yeah, the expenses are ridiculous, especially, I live in Southern California where things are ridiculously expensive. So, yeah, a brick and mortar store in 2019, I don't see the reason for it. In fact, aren't a lot of stores sort of going the opposite route, sort of closing their brick and mortars online only?
Yeah. I
don't mean just comic shops. I mean in general, major stores, clothing stores and things of that nature.
Yeah, a lot of them are like, I'm going to close my store once the lease is up, I mean, the only ones that can typically survive now, I think, are the people who actually own their own building. If they own the real estate, they can always sublease or, whatever, But if you're leasing from somebody else, forget it. Unless it's a really high-end product, which comic books aren't, even at $4 a pop. That's pretty much it. It's like,
I I couldn't imagine if you had a monthly lease of $3,000 to $4,000, and you're selling $4 comic books. I mean, just I'd be tearing my hair out every month. Yeah. But of course, the great thing with having a brick and mortar store is you could also do the online stuff at the same time.
Right.
You could certainly supplement. It's not like a store is busy. 12 hours a day. You could certainly spend your downtime listing things.
Right.
But again, it seems like an extra expense.
I don't know if you ever saw this. I still have it in my stuff somewhere. It was a magazine. It was on newsprint, just black and white. It was called How to Start a Comic Store or something like that. And it came out like about 1980, 81, somewhere along the line. And it was saying you could start it with $1,000, which seemed like a lot then, because that's when but it wasn't a lot. Like now, you'd probably have to start it. You'd probably have to start with like $50,000 or something like that just to get up and running and everything. If you're really seriously intent on starting a comic book store in the traditional way.
A friend of mine told me that he knows a guy who's opening a brand new comic store here in my area soon, and all I can think of is now in 2019. Why would you do that?
Yeah. Strange. So, let's talk about one last thing before I let you go.
Okay.
You have different books, or you've written a few different books. Some of them I've never seen. One of them I know well, and we could start with that one, is The Shy Guy's Guide to Dating. How did that come about? I mean, I know you said you were a shy guy. How did you come about writing it, and how did you break out of your shell?
Well, that's a book that 100% is based on my experiences. Very shy as a young man, never dated in high school, was always too shy to ask out any girls. Always wanted to, always, had the intention, but just couldn't get up the nerve. And the book is written in such a way where I talk about my experiences. I watched a lot of movies and TV shows, studied everything I saw, and then tried to duplicate what I saw in movies and TV shows. And the example I always like to give is, you'd watch a show like Happy Days, even like the nerdiest character on the show, which would be Potsy, would still get dates. Mm-hmm. And I used to say, well, even Potsy's getting dates, and he's like the biggest nerd. It's like, I'm better than Potsy, I could certainly do better than him. So it was just taking inspiration from teen sex comedies of the 80s, and then just in general, any show where they gave you advice on dating, or where you'd see Three's Company, Jack Tripper getting a new date every week.
Right.
The Love Boat. You see people hooking up all the time. You're like, wow, these guys are having sex on the first night. What? How do you do that? How can I do that?
You just need script writers, that's all.
Yeah, most of those shows were written by script writers who probably never got laid.
Right, exactly.
It was their fantasy, but I believed the fantasy. So the book was written in a very humorous way of, hey, here's some shows you could watch, and I remember watching this show, and it inspired me to do that, and I was scared to hit on girls, but then I saw this one show where Jack Tripper hit on a girl, that kind of thing. So it's very much a lighthearted look at getting over your shyness and meeting girls. Mm-hmm. And the book did quite well. I got my nice little bump in the L.A. reality/game show market, being the shy. They called me the shy guy guru, which I thought was pretty funny. And I did a whole bunch of game shows and reality shows with it, you're the guy who wrote the book on dating, but you're single. Ha, ha, ha. So they get the big laugh line, and I get some TV exposure, and then the book did really well. I was very happy with it.
Of course, dating doesn't mean you're in a relationship, but so...
That's true. So, maybe I was dating a different girl every night.
It was there, huh?
But, it's the old thing where people are like, oh, you think you're the expert on dating, blah, blah. So, no. The book was written to help guys who have trouble getting over that hump of how can I just ask down a girl. It was never me saying I'm the expert. I just said I figured out a way to do it based on studying the behavior of my favorite movie and TV show characters. Watching movies like what was that? The movie I think it was Hard Bodies. Mm-hmm. Back in the 80s, we had all these sex comedies.
Right.
Last American Virgin. I hated Porky's. That one was not good. Like Fast Times at Ridgemont High. Just good old-fashioned teen sex comedies.
Right.
And so those are among my inspirations. And I never said I was an expert on dating. I'm just an expert on getting over shyness and at least approaching girls to the point where you can, ask them out.
Did you ever knowingly help anybody? Like, did you ever get letters saying, you really helped me, what you wrote in the book, or is...
Yeah, I'd say so. I had a few people. either sent me emails or I would do book signings, and someone would show up at a book signing with a copy of the book in hand and say, like, yeah, the new book really helped me a lot. I used to do a Q&A thing. There used to be a website I had for the book, Shy Guy's Guide to Dating website. I don't have it anymore. But and I had an advice thing in there where you could write to me and ask me questions, but over time, the questions were all basically the same question over and over and over again. How do I ask out this girl? So at a certain point, I was like, I can't. How many times can I answer the same question? So
right.
I let it go.
And you have a couple other books. You may have more, but I've only found 3 that you did. One is Everything I Really Really Needed to Know I've Learned from TV, which sounds like the basis for the Shy Guy book as well.
I guess you could see a theme in my work. I watched so much TV as a kid. I barely watch any TV as a grown-up. I kind of feel like I did all my prime TV watching in the 70s and 80s.
Right.
Kind of got it out of my system, and now the thought of when people talk about binging shows, I'm like, oh, where you got to watch all 64 episodes? My God, who has the time? So I don't really binge anything, Or if I do, I take like 3 years to watch one show. So, my version of binging is 1 episode a week every Tuesday night at 8 o'clock. That's my binge.
Right.
So, in other words, the old network TV model. That worked so well, so many years. But yeah, that was, of course, the book, All I Need to Know I Learned in Kindergarten.
Mm-hmm.
I just looked at that book and I said, well, the only things I ever learned in kindergarten were finger painting and napping. Those are the 2 things I didn't really learn them. I probably knew them already. So really, TV has taught me far more than anything else ever could. So I said, let's make a book out of that. And it did pretty well, actually.
Mm-hmm. I didn't even know you wrote that one. I do remember that book. I may even have it somewhere, but it's like, oh, you did write that book. Huh, okay.
Yeah, I asked my buddy Rick Parker to draw that one, and then he went on to do Beavis and Butthead for Marvel.
Yep.
We had met while working at Marvel, and I said, this guy's a very talented artist. He was only doing lettering at the time. He wasn't doing any drawing, really.
I know. I've talked to him before. Yeah, he said he started as a letterer, which is really strange. But, yeah.
Well, you could sort of tell by the end he was kind of getting bored with the lettering. He really just wanted to have fun drawing, because he's so good at drawing.
Right.
At that point, it was a waste of his talents to have him just be a letterer. He's just his cartooning is brilliant.
Mm-hmm. Then the other book I saw is How to Be a Hollywood Superstar. Now, that one I don't think I've ever seen, so tell me about
You should buy it on Amazon. It's great.
That's right. That's where I saw it. I was like, I didn't know I did this book.
Another super talented artist. I was working with, when I was editing Captain America, or assistant editing, there was an artist on that book named Dave Hoover. And I said, I'm looking for an artist who can do caricatures. He goes, my brother, Rich, he does caricatures. So sure enough, his brother does these brilliant caricatures. He has, both of the Hoover brothers have sadly passed on. Actually, they both died pretty young. But I was really thrilled I was able to get him to draw that book for me before he passed on.
Very
and it's a really funny book. And, it's just a really funny look about how if you can imitate the behavior of all your favorite celebrities, then you could be a superstar too. Throw your cell phone in someone's face at the hotel desk, that kind of thing.
And any truth in it? I mean, has anything worked?
Well, it's clearly worked for me. I don't know anybody else who's tried it. But,
weren't you in a couple movies too, or something like that? Just a little bit parts or something?
Yeah, I did some extra work in movies back when ironically, I lived in the Miami area, and there was a lot of that going on at the time.
Okay.
But ultimately, I got super bored with it, and now I like to describe myself as a show business personality, meaning I don't do any acting, but you will occasionally see me on TV. I have one TV gig that I taped earlier this year. I can't really talk about it yet because it hasn't aired yet, and they told us not to. But that'll be coming up on the National Geographic Channel.
Wow. That's from left field.
It's
seemingly left field. It may not be for you, but for me, it's like, whoa.
It'll be a really interesting show. I can't say anything about it, but it's an interesting social experiment that I did not know was going. Like I knew I was going to be on the show, but they didn't tell us what the experiment was before we got there. So you'll see something fun there. And then there may or may not be another game show coming up in 2019. It's too soon to say at this point.
But it wouldn't be Howard Stern. It would be something else, right?
No, this would be a network.
Like the Jeopardy Wheel of Fortune Price is Right type stuff? That type?
Yeah, some kind of a primetime network
that type of
game
thing.
show.
Okay.
We haven't taped it yet, and we're not allowed to tell you what it is.
Well, when it's closer, message me or something and let me know what it is. But
okay.
Anyway. And then you're still doing, I know you do a lot of stuff on YouTube and stuff like that, do your opinions about things there and stuff like that. You're still doing that pretty regularly now?
Not as regularly as I was. I don't really get many hits when I do it, so it's one of those things where you put a couple hours into something and you get like 30 hits, and you go, well, maybe there's better ways for me to reach people. Maybe there's...
Okay. Because I know you had some frustration with that a while back, and I don't know if you were able to amend that, and it sounds like no. So, okay.
Well, it's interesting because most of my friends on Facebook are pretty much over 40, and so they grew up in the era of not watching things on videos. Like, I did an experiment. I said, let me write a review of a movie and then also record a video of reviewing the same thing, and I got far more hits on the written review than I did on the video. Wow. And then I asked my friends, I said, well, just out of curiosity, what makes you not want to watch a video? And most people, it was interesting, they just said, well, we're at work, we're busy, we don't have time to watch a video, but if it's an article, I can click on the article whenever, going to the bathroom or, going, sitting around the house late at night, bedtime. You can... I guess people prefer to, at least my Facebook friends just prefer to read things rather than watch a video, but they grew up in a different era for the most part. So I give credit. But the other thing, too, is if you're going to review a movie, the main thing people seem to do is put clips, lots and lots of clips from the movie, just steal them from the trailer or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, sort of too lazy to go to all the trouble to put all the clips in there. So, if I'm not going to do it in such a way that people like that format, mm-hmm. They don't want to see one guy's face talking for the most part. They prefer to see the clips mixed in. Right. So if you're willing to do the work, you could probably get some good views, but I guess I'm too lazy for that. Or I don't know all the technology yet. I'm still learning.
Well, it does take a lot of effort. I'll agree. I mean, even doing these podcasts takes a little effort because I have to edit it. I can't just put it up. We're done. Here it is. It's like I have to make it sound all nice and cut off the ends and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, but anything else going on for you that we should look out for besides game shows and National Geographic? And
eventually, someday I'm going to turn my blog into a book. I did a blog where I told about all my experiences in game shows and reality TV shows.
Cool.
So that will be a book someday. I apologize to all my Kickstarter backers. It is happening, just taking longer than it should. But it is happening. I
so it was a Kickstarter. Okay.
Yeah, there was. That was my first and last. And someday I'm going to do a graphic novel where I talk about all my experiences in online dating, and I will definitely be calling Mike Gazela for that one because cool. He's one of many artists I want to work with on that project.
Yes, very good. So if somebody wants to get a hold of you, what's the best way? Websites, contact, info?
Best way is through Facebook. That seems to be the go-to these days.
Okay. And if they're trying to buy comic books from you, I mean, do you have a store on eBay or anything, or you just put up everything just randomly?
I do have an eBay store. I can give you the name. Unfortunately, couldn't get the name I wanted, so I just
It's not Barry Comics.
No, and in fact, I should have gone with that because I tried Barry's Comics. That was taken. Barry's Comics 2, Barry's Comics 3, Barry's Comics 3000. All of them were taken. So I eventually ended up with this, and it's Funky, Funky. I think it's 25207. That's what I got stuck with. So
wow.
Yeah.
Funky.
In retrospect, I should have come with a different name, but that's the one I have at this time.
You're stuck with it forever.
But basically, I sell most of my comics on Facebook. So if you follow me on Facebook, there is a group I belong to called Comic Book Lovers. And if you join the Comic Book Lovers group, we have 15,000 hardcore comic book fans there.
Wow.
And I post new books just about every single day of the year, so it's a lot of fun.
Very cool. All right. I want to thank you, Barry, for being my special guest today. And it was fun.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you for listening, and thank you, Barry Dutter, for being my special guest. Episode number 54 will be coming soon. If you would like to comment and or be a guest on this podcast, please drop me a line at funideas.mark@gmail.com. Become a Patreon of Mark Arnold and Fun Ideas Productions. If everyone listening just contributed $1 a month, that would be a tremendous help in continuing the production of my books and this podcast. Also, subscribe to my YouTube channel. The opening and closing music for the Fun Ideas podcast is provided courtesy of Andrew the Slow Poisoner Goldfarb and is used with permission. This has been the Fun Ideas podcast. This is Mark Arnold speaking. This episode is copyright 2019 Fun Ideas Productions. Thank you very much, and have a good night.
Lace to rhinestone kisses on those blind eyelids and drive with your velour chauffeur across the river Styx. Popping creation pills in the pink electric church. The final flicker of your lose.